Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars on it's a fairly chipper Florida Wednesday, I have to say. The weather is not that bad. We're somewhere in the high 50s, low 60s. The humidity is okay. It's not a, omnipresent thing. It's just there. We have a couple of days of pretty good weather, the kind of weather that I would expect in March in Naples this time of year. Unfortunately, when I look at the weather report, it is not meant to be. We've got another 10 days of crappy, shitty hot weather on the way, unseasonably warm, high 80s, not quite approaching the miserable summer temperatures, but a pretty horrible reminder of what's to come. And it's just the kind of thing that's soul-killing to me, and it makes me absolutely miserable. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Birds have been pretty loud, I have to say, and there's one creepy one. I haven't heard it's called. Well, I have before over the years, but not very often. Kind of a weird hoo-hooing thing, and hopefully whatever the hell is making that noise doesn't make its appearance anytime soon. We can just carry on with this car. And what I have today is a 1985 Buick LeSabre collector edition coupe. It's a stunning car. It really is. It's a car that I like, and it's a car that I'm happy to have and review. I have done a B-body like this before. Not too long ago, we did a 1984 LeSabre with 4 doors, which was a fine car, but I just have a thing for the coupes that made me want to keep going, do this car, and said, the hell with it. I don't care if I've done one before. I'm going to do another one. And instead of zeroing in on the B-body, or even on 1985, because we did just do that Eldorado touring coupe and got into the year 1985, I thought I would focus instead on what the hell Buick is all about, and we'd go back and do Buick's history a little bit. I've probably done it before, but I don't remember, so that helps. Before we get into that, the coronavirus whiskey, it might be coming to an end. I don't know, but I'm getting this feeling because I haven't really seen anything about the coronavirus in the news for a few days, which makes me think it's over. And what the hell am I doing protecting myself from something that doesn't even show up on CNN? I think instead I'm going to have to start taking anti-Russian whiskey or anti-Soviet whiskey because, apparently that's the new big threat. It's the thing we're all worried about. I don't exactly know how whiskey is going to help me defend myself against the Soviets, but it can't hurt. And that's the way that I'm looking at things. So right now, as of this morning, I've had a few good swigs of anti-Soviet whiskey, and we'll see what that does for me. I have a mask in my bag as well. I don't intend to use it, but just in case it turns out that we need masks to defend ourselves from the Soviets, I've got one that's absolutely ready to go, and we'll be good on that front. But anyway, look, I digress. Back to Buick and back to where it came from. You had a guy named David Dunbar Buick. I'd call him a Scottish immigrant, but he came here with his family when he was 2, so he really didn't have much choice in the matter. They moved to Detroit. He grew up there. He went to school there, and by all accounts, he seemed to be a nice young guy. Well, he quit school, probably to his parents' chagrin, to join a plumbing company, which would, of course, be the dream of any young man at any given moment. And, he was happy enough. Well, the plumbing company ran into problems, and then he and a friend who worked for it decided to try and take it over, which they did. And they actually ended up doing quite well with it. As it turned out, Mr. Buick had a real gift for innovation and invention, and his friend had a real gift for doing business. So they were actually a very good mix. Buick basically invented the lawn sprinkler, which still, of course, continues to this day and pisses a lot of people off, but you need them, so there it is. He did that. He also created the sort of enameling process for cast iron that is still being used today. I guess there aren't that many cast iron bathtubs left, but if you have one, it's probably been enameled by the process that Mr. David Buick came up with. So the guy was pretty cool. He knew what he was doing. And the plumbing plumbing company, it became pretty successful as a result. They started making money. They, grew the company. Everything was going really well. And then David Buick got enamored of the internal combustion engine, which had about as much to do with plumbing as, squirrels do. I mean, it's just not something that really mattered to plumbing that much. And his partner became pissed off that David Buick is spending all of his time dicking around with internal combustion engines. So the two of them have a big fight. They decide to break up. They sell the company. It's a big, successful company at that point, so they do pretty well. And Buick walks away with about $100,000, which in today dollars is about $3 million. That gave him the capital and the time to really dick around with the internal combustion engine. So he started a company called the Buick Auto Vim and Power Company in 1899. Now, the thing about Buick, and this would be the theme of his life, is that he was a terrific inventor and a very crafty guy, but he was an absolutely shit businessman. So he spent all of his time in R&D. He hired some good engineers to help him, and they came up with an incredible design for an engine that actually would revolutionize everything. It was the overhead valve engine. He was the first guy to come up with it. Other companies at the time were doing a side valve job that didn't make much sense at all. And this engine that Buick made would basically lay the foundation for every modern engine made, even currently. Even overhead cam engines today owe their foundation to Buick's design. But again, he was absolutely shit at turning that into money. So by 1902, the Buick Vim and Power Company was out of business, or at least out of money, and had to shut down. But he had this great product. So he started another company called the Buick Manufacturing Company with the idea that he was going to build engines for use in agricultural applications, and developed those, did what he was going to do, and ran into the same problems. He just didn't know how to turn his product into money. So within a year, he's basically broke again. At that point, he goes to a well-connected friend of his, a guy named Briscoe, I believe, to invest in another company, which would be called the Buick Motor Company, which would build cars. And this one actually ended up working. But it basically worked because they brought in some other moneyed interests and crafty guys to build it. One of them being a guy named William C. Durant, who, of course, features pretty heavily in the car industry history books. Buick didn't fit into his own company after a time because, again, just not really a businessy type. And he was essentially sort of drummed out of the company in 1906 in a pleasant way for a small severance package and one share of Buick stock that he then sold to William Durant for $100,000, which again put him back in the $3 million mark, which was a fair amount of money, not doing too bad. But if he had held that stock for a few more years, it would have been worth exponentially more, as in 1908, Buick became the foundation for General Motors, add in Cadillac and Oldsmobile, with Durant at the head, and it of course became one of the biggest and most successful and sort of all-encompassing companies of the 20th century. But, it's the theme of Buick's life that things just didn't work out for him. So he went on his merry way with his $3 million. He made some really shitty investments in California oil and Florida real estate. Oh, God, I feel his pain. He tried to get back into the car industry in the 1920, 1921. That didn't work out. That lasted almost no time. And then basically died in poverty and misery and obscurity, probably drunk. I don't know it, but he probably was, working really menial job. He was like the, head of the information desk at one of these technical schools, and then he died of ass cancer in 1929, and it's just devastating. I mean, this poor guy, his name has been on 50 million cars to date, Buick is a name that basically everybody knows. It has worldwide brand recognition. And, the guy who essentially came up with it died in relative obscurity and sadness, in 1929. So there's some talk of trying to memorialize him. There's some people have said, what a guy. He tasted greatness. He sipped from its cup and then, spilled all the contents. But, not everybody... not everybody has the ability to rip everybody off and become a very successful guy like William Durant did. So anyway, God bless him. Meanwhile, again, 50 million cars to date, and it remains as one of GM's profitable brands, mostly because the Chinese like Buicks. Through some quirk of fate and history, Buick had a presence in China dating back, maybe 100 years or so. And it's just one of those quirks that's paid off very well for General Motors today. But you won't find any LeSabres in China because the name was discontinued in 2005 after 8 generations. What you will find in China and in the U.S. are these horrific little SUVs the size of golf carts with Tri-Shield badges on them, but no Buick nameplate because, like Oldsmobile, GM's starting to think that Buick, the name, is just a little bit too fuddy-duddy, and now you don't see it on the back of any more Buicks. I think it's a crime against humanity and a genuine shame. But what are you going to do? So we'll see if Buick survives. I guess as long as the China... 80% of the market is sold in China. 80% of Buicks produced. And most of them, by the way, are produced in China. Go and look at a new Buick on the lot in America, and there's a strong chance that it will have been almost entirely produced in China by the Chinese. It's just... The world is a very different place now, even from when I worked at a Buick dealership in the early 1990s. So it's just not something any of us would have thought would happen. The first production LeSabre came out in 1959, but it was not the first time the name had been used. That was on the legendary 1951 LeSabre Concept Car, which was put together by a guy named Harley Earl, one of the most famous, GM designers of all time, and a guy who could have run a circus if he hadn't been in the car business. It used styling cues from jet aircraft, introduced the wraparound windshield and tail fins that would, come to dominate car design a few years later. It was very advanced. It used a rear-mounted transmission, supercharged 215 V8 that could run on gasoline or run on methanol. It used a modern 12-volt system. It had heated seats. The convertible top had a water or rain sensing mechanism that would activate it if it, thought it was starting to rain. It had a jet intake styled bumper with hideaway headlights. It had Dagmars on the front bumper, even electric lifting jacks. If you needed to change a spare tire, you pressed a button and the car would lift itself up. And it was all fully operational. And after it did the show circuit, Harley Earl drove it around himself as a personal driver. And just absolutely fascinating. It's ended up at the GM Heritage Museum now, and I think it still makes the rounds on a few show circuits. But that was a pretty incredible car. This LeSabre, this 85 Collector's Coupe, which I really like, by the way, is not quite as groundbreaking, certainly not in 1985, but in 1977, it was. It was a downsized car from the previous generation, significantly so, by a couple of feet and probably 700 pounds. It was smaller than the full-size LeSabre that it had replaced. And one thing that made it work was that it still appealed to the traditional buyer. It was still body on frame. It was still V8 powered. It had the same amount of room inside. It had a cavernous trunk. It may not have been terribly aggressive in its styling, but the styling suited the time, and it sold fairly well. It was one of the few cars that didn't have any kind of awkward phase when it went to the downsizing to, enter into the malaise era, and that was, and in fact they continued on with it long enough. It went all the way through 85 through this car, that by the time they fully downsized in 86 with a front-wheel drive model, that wasn't all that groundbreaking anymore, and Buick most traditional buyers were able to transition into that without too much fuss. So it really did serve its purpose very well over those 8 years by getting the older and more sensible and conservative Buick buyer to embrace the whole downsizing thing enough to keep the brand going. And of course, with with some luck, that 3800 engine was considered great, and Buick had a monopoly on it for a little while. That kept the company pretty successful through the late 80s and early 90s, and Buick just had this great reputation for quality that stuck with it. And of course, that's helped it survive all of the cancel culture at GM, where cars like Pontiac and Oldsmobile and Saturn, went the way of the dodo bird, and Buick remained. But of course, its popularity in China had a big part of that. So anyway, I'm going to pause there for a minute and get my crap together, maybe have a little more anti-Soviet whiskey, and then we're going to get right back into this specific car. So bear with me for one moment. All right, I'm still moving the car around to try and get ourselves out of the sun, because it just ruins everything. It's going to ruin the temperature later on. I still have sun patterns on the back of the car, but the hell with it, I don't care. Look, to me, this was the last great rear-drive Buick. I know I'm going to get some shit for that, because, of course, the estate wagon rolled on for a few more years after this one, I think till 1990 or so. And, of course, then there was the Buick. Listen to that pissed-off bird. Man, that thing is like right there. It sounds enormous. Let's keep an eye on that. Anyway, and then of course there was the Roadmaster, which, bears mentioning, which came out in the early 90s. But, even though that was a big rear drive platform, you could tell that the styling was based on the sort of modern aero European influence stuff that was coming out. It was just, it was meant to be a throwback to the traditional Buick buyers who were all pissed off. And it worked, and they sold some cars, and they were great cars. But to me, these cars, these B-bodies from 77 to 85, were the last unashamedly American Buicks. Rear drive, body on frame, sharp creases, zero European influence of any kind, just unashamedly domestic. And I think that's a big reason about why I love them. I mean, you look up front, you've got the 4 square headlights. Buick has always been this in between, it's sort of for the conservative executive. Yeah, not anymore, obviously, but back in the day, the guy who thought a Cadillac maybe was too ostentatious but wanted Cadillac quality and prestige, that was the guy who bought a Buick. Way back when, it was the same story. Even in the early 20th century, Oldsmobile, believe it or not, was considered to be sort of an advanced high-tech company, that was into innovation. And of course, Cadillac was still very high-end and ostentatious. Buick was sort of a conservative in-between, a very well-built car that did what it was supposed to do, conveyed presence on its owner without calling too much attention. And I think that's also why I like these cars. They're of Cadillac quality, but they don't have the same look-at-me factor, which Cadillacs thrive on. Again, you've got the 4 square headlights. You've got the slatted grille in the middle. That's very, very nice. This one being an 85, it's a collector's edition. Everyone knew it was going to be the last one, so you can see that on the badge. It's kind of cool. The big chrome bumper that wraps around and does a decent job of blending in. The slab sides, the squared off fenders, the lines in the hood with the trim line running to the back. You've got a nice judicious use of chrome around the windshield and the side windows. I like the way the door sort of dips down, goes to the back, and then edges back up again at the rear quarter panel. I think that looks all very nice. You've also got a big chrome rocker panel strip, which adds to the overall appeal of the car. You've got those turbine look alloy wheels, which are absolutely stunning. Color-coded door handles, more collector edition badges on the B-pillar here, which look pretty cool. The rear, again, the day of the hardtop coupe are gone, so those rear windows don't go down, but it does look nice and it does look traditional. You also get a formal roof, which has a little bit of a slant to it, but is still very vertical. You've got this little quarter vinyl top, which I think looks quite nice, particularly with the band that runs across the front of it. You know, a long, gradually swooping trunk line going into a very squared back end with squared taillights with chrome around them. Looks very, very nice, and the impact strip down the side even does a good job. So the car is fairly ornate. I mean, it does have a lot of chrome on it, but it manages to do so without calling too much attention to itself. So if you look here in the back, you've got the license plate, which in a very traditional American fashion folds down to conceal the gas door. And, you know, I just think it all does a very nice job of looking terrific. You see this Buick script here. That is what is missing from any car, any Buick built from there I go again, from 2019 onward. They just got rid of the Buick script, and they're counting on that tri-shield to be the indicator of the car, and let the keys in it, so let me get that. And I don't know, again, it's just all a shame to me. Who would know that Buick would go on to basically be a Chinese company? Alright, here's one reason these B-bodies did appeal to the traditional Buick buyer who had bought huge cars through the 60s and 70s. They had a huge trunk. It still managed to have a pretty enormous trunk. I mean, even with that donut spare tire up there, you could still fit a ton of crap in here. I mean, an infant it's like a mansion for a toddler or an infant back here. They've got space to run around. They're free. They can, you know, jump up and down. There's no issues at all. I mean, yeah, obviously there's nowhere to really tie them down or anything, but I don't think you need to. I mean, it's big enough that they can just run free. Here you see the original mats with the car, and this thing is just this low mileage. It's ridiculous. I don't know how somebody keeps a car like this for, you know, the 37 years or whatever the hell it is. It freaks me out a little bit that somebody has that kind of willpower, but they did. And so these original mats are still with the car, and it's pretty epic to see. You see all the jacking tools and that sort of stuff up there. I guess Buick employees at the time weren't too hateful, so the jacking instruction decal is actually centered quite nicely and looks good, and the build sticker that has the options on the car, again, actually centered and looking pretty good. So kudos to whoever was on the assembly line this day. And anyway, everything looking nice. I also like the way that these don't have struts that you have to replace. You see it as just a torsion bar system to pop the trunk in a classic American style. These cars don't require the same amount of irritating maintenance that modern cars do, in the way that they always need some stupid part that you have to go and put on. Let's have a look under the hood. This was another big part of the successful downsizing of this car, was that it maintained, oh my god, there's bird shit on the hood. It maintained a V8 power plant. I mean, you could get 6s. They were in, you know, out there, but not that many people opted for them. Over the course of the 8 years that this platform, this car was offered, you could get the 3.8-liter Buick, which wasn't a bad engine, but really didn't have enough oomph for the car. There was a 252 V6, a 4.1-liter, kind of the same story. 301 Pontiac you could get in some of these things, the 4.9-liter. Everyone was really proud of that engine when it came out. And it was a fine engine, but really didn't have the torque to move a big car like this in a convincing way. And then there was a 307 Oldsmobile, which this one has, and that's probably the engine of choice. It's very, very smooth, very proper, has a good torque rating, and is the correct engine for one of these cars, even if it is made by Oldsmobile and not Buick. Would have been nice if they had a Buick engine in these cars, but by that time corporate GM stuff was taken over, and they just didn't need to have that many different V8s going into that many different cars. It was much easier to use an Oldsmobile engine across the board than it was to have 4 or 5 different V8s anymore. So Yeah, that was the way. You could also get diesels. There was a 350 diesel, which was a converted gas motor, which was pretty much shit. And in some of the earlier versions, the 403 Oldsmobile was available. And of course, that's a pretty damn great power plant. Transmissions, there were really only 3 ever offered in these cars. You had a Turbo Hydra 350, a Turbo Hydra 400 towards the very beginning, and then the Turbo Hydra 200 4R. As it would be in this car with the 4-speed and the overdrive. In '85 only, these 307s received roller lifters for reduced friction, so a pretty terrific engine combo. And it'd probably be better if it had the 3-speed turbo 350 for longevity. But you know, given all the different options you could have, I think this 85 probably has the best setup. Again, with the 40,000 miles on this thing, it's pretty ridiculously nice under the hood. Everything as it should be, and you know, no issues at all. So there's coil springs all the way around the car. You've got them at the front and the back. Obviously, it has a solid rear axle, but it's, you know, mated to a trailing arm coil spring setup that gives it pretty good travel. It also has front and rear anti-sway bars, and basically the thing just floats down the road. It has an absolutely stunning ride that you really only get with the body-on-frame stuff, and that's just, you know, it was a hallmark of Buick for so many years, and to me it was a shame when it went away. Basically at the end of the Roadmaster, even if it, yeah, I mean, that was a carry-on, but I'll give it to him. The hell with it. We went away in '96 when the Roadmaster went kaput. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to close the hood down. I'm going to get my crap in the trunk now, and then we're going to hop in, look at the interior, and go for a drive. So hold on for just a moment. Look at those bastards. All right, let's have a look inside this thing. You know, this interested me a little bit. I was going to pull it off, and then I didn't. When I first looked at it, I honestly thought this was some sort of religious thing. You know, I had no idea. It turns out it's some sort of auto guard rust proofing, but why they use the picture of this cat on that, you know, I get it. He had a pretty good company that makes rust proofing, but that is just not the image to me to present on the car. But yeah, what the hell, there it is. I also found it interesting that it came from Frankenmuth. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I don't care. It turns out it's some little town in Michigan that has a German theme and some sort of museum honoring, you know, I don't know what. But anyway, it's an interesting little place, and we have some sort of insect. Anyway, just get into the car. Being a Buick, it has this padded velour, which is, you know, quite nice to sit on and look at, and just stops short of looking like a Bulgarian bordello. You know, if it was finished in red, it probably would. I think the blue maybe makes it look a little bit more conservative. But of course, that's also Buick's thing, is it's supposed to be lush and luxurious without being too ostentatious. And maybe it's not just the blue, maybe it's the true Buick theme happening here. It does, of course, have acres of wood forest, or fake wood forest anyway. I love the way it consumes the entire top half of the door panel. I mean, it's just an absolute expanse of it. And then that carries over into the dashboard. You also have velour and carpet, because why not? And a chrome strip, and then a vinyl elbow rest with, of course, your power windows and locks. You've got your mirror control there. These collector coupes were limited, which is the higher end package, and you know, gives you a badge so you can make people know that. The back seat, your Canadians are going to be chipper. They're going to be I think, very, very happy, especially if there's only 2 of them. If there's 3, I guess one has to sit in that weird little dip section in the middle, and they may not be that happy. But if you got 2, they're going to be just fine. Their asses are going to be ensconced in lovely soft velour, cushion pillow looking stuff, and everyone's going to be very happy back there. In fact, that would be a nice place to have a passionate encounter before you went to a Loverboy concert. Up front, again, same story. Unashamedly American. There's no hint of Euro in this at all. There's no sport seats or steering wheel buttons or, anything at all that would indicate there's any European influence in this car. Even the power seat controls are in the traditional place down on the side of the bottom cushion. And there you've got your Body by Fisher tag on the stamped out sort of shiny aluminum trim down the sole panel. So that is just one of the things that I like about this era of Buick. It just is so damn American. Let's fire this thing up. Yeah, I mean, it just loves running. These 307 olds, they're just terrific engines. This one puts out like 140 horse, like 240 foot-pounds. It's enough, It's not exactly a rocket ship, but it's enough to motivate the car down the road. You have just 2 round gauges. You've got your 85-mile-an-hour speedo with a big red 55 to warn the guy from Ohio that's as fast as he can go in the fast lane. You've got your basically a big gauge there for a PRNDL indicator, that you can see this one does have the overdrive. It's got the 4-speed, which of course makes it a little nicer on the highway. And then over there, this enormous gauge that does nothing but tell you how much fuel you have. I don't know if there was a gauge pack you could get in these things. There definitely was in the Pontiac versions, but in a Buick, what does your Buick driver need? This is everything right there that a Buick driver needs. Of course, you have a column shift. You've got a tilt wheel. Nice. You've got your sort of multi-function stock here that gives you your cruise control, your wipers, and your high beam control. You got your headlights over there. You've got a very flat dash layout with more of the fake wood. You got these vertical vents that, push the air. You've got a right mirror control. You've got standard climate control. I'm sure there was a digital offered, but this one isn't. AM/FM cassette deck beneath it that still works fine. Yeah, it's a good song. It really is. I guess there's some scandal about that song where they rejected it for the movie and then it became a #1 hit, and nobody cares. You got a rear defog here that works great. You got a glove box over there. Being the collector's edition, you got a little special badge in there, a little thing. And now we've got some books and other crap that came with it. There's the original owner's stuff, the owner's manual. I haven't really looked through any of this. I only bought the car a few days ago. And then they went to Tuffy. That means they got hosed. And, I'm sure Tuffy's fine. And then some service receipts. All makes sense in a nice manila envelope. Otherwise, that's it. I mean, basically, it's just a comfortable way for a guy like Matlock to get from point A to point B with no real issues at all. And you can hear the phone is binging in my ear, and I don't care. Let's just go for a spin. Actually, it has a bit of a nice V8 rumble to it. I'm gonna wait here for the gates for a while. You've got this lovely big expansive hood in front of you that has a nice gentle curve, which is accentuated by that chrome strip. You really don't see the curvature when you're looking at the car outside, but you do get it from here. From the outside, it looks like every edge on it is very, very straight. Power antenna, I think, actually works, which is shocking. Let's see, it appears to be original. Yeah, look at that. Down it goes. That's another thing I like, a real power antenna. That's just not something you see anymore. Oh, great. Look at this. We've got dump trucks in the middle of the street doing whatever the hell they're doing. All right, I'm going to pause here for a minute, wait for these dump trucks to get the hell out of the way, and then we'll pick it up again at the end of the road. All right, so look, the car goes down the road beautifully, and I mean, it goes down, The steering is responsive in the same way the steering would be responsive in a Bertram. You know, it's not what you would call precise cornering style stuff, but it's lovely. There's no play in it. It goes where you point it. You've got this little tiny wood ensconced, you know, steering wheel with over assist, and that's the way it should be for a car like this. You've got a power front disc rear drum setup that gives you good brakes with none of that newfangled anti-lock crap. That's what it's supposed to do. It's a great cruiser, man. You get this body on frame feeling, so you're just kind of floating along. Your coil springs are taking up the bumps, the shocks, you know, probably Monroe Gasmatics or whatever the hell they're called. Probably put it at the Sears Auto Center. Well, who knows? 40,000 miles. This could still have the originals. But you know what I mean? This owning this car, driving this car, maintaining this car is such a traditional American experience. From the mechanic that you might use to the parts that go on it to the problems it could have, they're just all... You know, there's never going to be an issue with the CAN bus system in it, you know, or the driver adaptive transmission, or, you know, the liquid cooled rear differential. This isn't like that. This isn't about that. This is a very simple car that has its original basis in basically the covered wagon, and it's just a very advanced feature of that. So you have to love it. You have to love it. You know, they're becoming much more collectible as time goes on because so many of them got, you know, they got destroyed. The cash for clunkers killed a lot of them. It's a real shame. But a few still survive, and they're creeping up in value, and they're great collector car to own. They are a great collector car to own because they're easy to drive, they're easy to maintain, there's a bunch of parts out there, and it's a fun thing to cruise around on a weekend, and it's not going to break the bank. So there it is. This is a 1985 Buick LeSabre Coupe Collector's Edition. This one's very, very clean, very nice, 40,000 miles, a real sweetheart. I think I'm going to be running it in that premier auction that's coming up in a few weeks, because as much as I love all these cars, you just can't afford to keep them, even if you did have somewhere to put them. So, yeah, there it is. So that'll be available anyway, and I really appreciate everyone who tunes in, anyone who's carried on till this point in the video. God bless you. We got more fun stuff coming up. I got a Mark IV coming up, which is stunning. Can't wait to do that, and we're just going to keep the ball rolling. So thanks again. Thanks for having a look. I'm going to try not to rear end this car that appears to be full of LP gas or some other combustible thing. I'm going to keep the anti-Soviet whiskey going, maybe the Corona. I don't know if it's gone yet, but it seems to be. But whatever, the whiskey can't hurt on any front, and we'll just keep chugging along. So thank you for having a look. Really appreciate it, and we will see you with the next one. Take care.